Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and today Apple released iOS 16.6 to the public. This is available at the same time everywhere around the world for everyone, and is available on the iPhone 8, 8 Plus, all the way up to the iPhone 14 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max. And this particular update will not show up if you're on iOS 17 betas. That's because you're on a newer version. But if you're on iOS 16.5.1 or older, you should have this update available. Now, if you're not seeing it, you can check by going to your settings, then going down to General, then Software Update, and you'll see the update there. If you're still not seeing it, turn off automatic updates and then check again, and the update should show up. Now, as far as the overall size, this is going to vary greatly depending on the device you're installing from or the version you're on. If you're on iOS 16.5.1, it could be a few hundred megabytes. If you're on an earlier version of iOS 16 betas, it could be over 6 gigabytes. It just depends on what you're installing from. Along with iOS 16.6, Apple also released iPadOS 16.6, watchOS 9.6, macOS 13.5, along with tvOS and HomePod OS 16.6. There's also updates to older devices for iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. Now, if you're installing this from iOS 16.5 and updating to 16.6, you will have a modem update, meaning that it should help with overall connectivity, or Apple made a change there to hopefully improve some updates. Now, as you can see here, it says iOS 16.6. This update provides important bug fixes and security updates and is recommended for all users. There's a lot of small back-end changes to iOS 16.6, but nothing obvious at the forefront. So, for example, Apple added support for the MacBook Air, Mac Pro, and Mac Studio that they launched not too long ago that supports things such as Find My, where they'll show up there. An example would be the little icons next to MacBook Air 15, for example, where it has the latest icon for the device itself. Now, there's a lot of back-end code changes, like I said, and another example would be when using iCloud with Windows and verifying, there may be new messages to make sure you're on the same network so you can verify your identity. Also, if you're using the Home app, so maybe you're using this with different cameras or more, it may force you to add two-factor authentication for security on certain devices. Also, there's wording changes within the Home app for Matter accessories, and also in the Wallet app, Apple updated some wording as well. So if you're in Wallet, and if maybe you're setting up a savings account or maybe family sharing with your Apple Card, some of the wording has been updated there. Additionally, there's new updates mentioning something along the lines of Siri setup for education. However, that could be something they could push later. There's a bunch of other wording changes for account recovery keys, as well as health and medication. And one thing they didn't add, which was in early betas, is contact key verification. It looks like they're pushing this out with iOS 17. We could find that before just by searching for it in settings, and as you search for it in settings, nothing shows up. With beta 1, it actually showed there, but it looks like they're probably pushing this to iOS 17. But they talked about it back in December 7th of 2022. And if we scroll down, you'll see iMessage contact key verification that helps you determine that you're actually speaking to who you think you're speaking to. It verifies their identity and just lets you know that. You can see that with a little message down below where it just verifies a lot of that information. So that's something I'm looking forward to, but unfortunately they haven't added in this update. As far as bug fixes, well, they have said there are bug fixes, but there's a few things that they haven't really mentioned. They did mention one thing, and that has to do with Home and pairing Matter accessories. So in the Home app, if maybe you're adding a new accessory, this sometimes could be a problem apparently for Matter accessories, and it would fail. Now that should work properly. That happened throughout the betas, and according to Apple, they've fixed that. They haven't mentioned any other bug fixes specifically, though. Normally, we get a list of what they've actually resolved, so they haven't actually resolved anything to do with the notification center. It's still buggy and jumps around. We even see this on iOS 17. They also haven't mentioned anything to do with the camera. However, we are seeing some better photo quality, less sharpness and things in iOS 17. We're not seeing any changes, though, with iOS 16 so far. They've really mentioned nothing as far as bug fixes, and I'm a bit disappointed that they haven't actually kept us up to date as to what's new and what's changed. This is a bit of a departure from what we had last year with major releases. Also, Apple is updating security, but this takes usually a few hours for them to update. Typically, by the time an update is released to the public, they haven't updated their website yet. So if we scroll down, you'll see the previous updates of Rapid Security Response, iOS 16.5.1c, but they will update this, and I'll link that in the description if you want to go through and see all of the security updates. And if you're wondering if you should install iOS 16.6, I would say absolutely, just due to the security updates alone. Again, they'll populate those a little bit later, but definitely install it due to security release updates, as that keeps your device protected. The nice thing is with those security releases that they do with the rapid security response is you can uninstall them, but you can't with a major update. As far as anything else additional, they haven't mentioned anything at all. However, performance overall on this update has been quite good. Scrolling through different things, even with ProMotion, it seems super smooth and fast. Going into different apps is nice and fast. They load quickly. Of course, some of this is dependent on your internet connection, but everything seems to work well, and that includes older devices as well. So we really haven't had many issues. Most people that have been testing the beta have been saying that it's done pretty well, and it stays nice and cool most of the time. With iOS 16.5.1, sometimes they were saying their device was heating up, and you definitely see that on iOS 17 betas. But in general, it seems to stay pretty cool. As far as overall battery life, let's go ahead and take a look at that. If we go into settings, and then we go down to battery, past it there, go to battery health and charging. This phone is at 100%. This is an iPhone 14 Pro Max, and honestly, this phone has not been used much. I've been running iOS 17 betas. So Abhishek sent in his battery life so we could take a look on a device that's running it regularly. And thanks again to Abhishek for sending in his battery, and this is a screenshot off an iPhone 11 Pro Max with 95% battery health. He had 2 hours and 51 minutes of screen on time and 3 hours and 51 minutes of screen off time, and used about 35 to 40% of his battery. The day after that, he used 4 hours and 27 minutes of screen on time and 1 hour and 41 minutes of screen off time, and used about 70% of his battery. So overall battery life is not phenomenal, but it's better than iOS 16.5.1 for most, according to the different community polls I've run on YouTube, and just overall experience since beta 1 through the release candidate. Now, as far as iOS 16.7 beta 1, we do expect that either later this week or possibly next week. At this point, usually Apple will release them in a day or so, but they could postpone this a little bit, and that will probably be the last version of iOS 16 until iOS 17 releases to the public. So we'll have iOS 16.7 betas, and also within a couple days, I would expect iOS 17 beta 4. Based off the last 2 years with iOS 15 beta 4 and iOS 16 beta 4, both of those were released on July 27th. So based off of that information, I would expect it anytime between Tuesday and Thursday, we could see iOS 17 beta 4. Of course, we'll have iOS 17 betas and probably weekly betas all the way up until the end of August, and then a final release sometime in mid-September, usually around the launch of the iPhone 15. We could see more betas than normal, all the way up to beta 8, beta 9, or we could even see less. It just depends on how stable it is and how finished it is, according to Apple. Now, as far as overall benchmarks, let's take a look at those. We'll run those quickly and see what they come up with. So we'll go to Geekbench 6 and run a CPU benchmark. Benchmarks completed, and on the left we have iOS 16.5.1, on the right is iOS 16.6. We scored 2,559 for single core compared to 2,524. For multi-core, we're a little bit higher as well at 6,281 compared to 6,150. So overall, it's a little bit better. You probably won't notice too much of a difference as far as performance. So that's everything with iOS 16.6. Expect all of the major features in iOS 17 though. And of course, we'll have to wait until September for the public release of that. Now, if you've found anything else in iOS 16.6, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Also, if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, it will be linked in the description as it normally is. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.